This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 5th part of What If Naruto Was Bastard Son of Minato. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto had remained silent for the majority of the journey to AIM, where his client was currently located. He was in such a state because he was still trying to wrap his head around the fact that this was the leader of the group of people he had killed multiple members of in the previous several months. If he had been the leader of such a group, he would have been all over avenging them in some way, but this guy didn't seem to care. That's why he found it strange, because it didn't make sense to him when he thought about it in his head. Even so, he stayed with the man because if this all turned out to be an elaborate ambush of some sort, as he suspected, he would kill off the leader and be done with it once and for all, making their group no longer a threat to him. Pain, as he was known, had told Naruto that his true body was in AIM, which made him raise an eyebrow the first time he heard it. When Naruto was told this, he whipped out his elaborate map that showed all the different places he had ever been so that he knew where he could summon his door and save on traveling time since timing was crucial in his profession. Unfortunately for him, he had never been to AIM, but that was primarily because they isolated themselves from others for reasons he was unaware of. But that was a shinobi issue, and he was a doctor. He also dealt with an all-kunoichi village that was the same way from time to time, but that made sense because it was women only, so he wouldn't be allowed inside. He'd healed a few of those women before, but in a nearby town because they explained their village's rule of not allowing men into their village, which he fully understood and didn't argue with them about because he had no reason to. He saw the closest he'd ever been to AIM and summoned a door for himself and Pain to enter so that they could enter the operating room before he opened another to his intended destination. Once back in the world, Pain wanted to hurry up, but Naruto had to explain that he wasn't a shinobi and didn't have their speed, so it would take a little longer than he had hoped. It was similar to how shinobi escorted civilians. Pain didn't believe it at first, because if he was truly that slow, he shouldn't have been able to kill 4 different S-ranked shinobi, let alone numerous other missing nin and bandits. And, for what it's worth, Pain was correct, but Naruto would never tell him because he was a doctor, and when his opponents faced him, they all assumed he was slow and were easily defeated because of their arrogance. That was their first and only mistake in life, because he was much faster than he let on. But, in the end, Pain gave in, and it took them a day and a half to arrive at their destination. He was then blindfolded, which he was assured was to protect the location of their hideout, which Naruto understood perfectly because this was not the first time bandits had asked for his assistance in healing them. Sure, they were bad men, but he healed everyone who paid him as long as they weren't too evil. When he entered their hideout, he saw a man with orange hair in what appeared to be some sort of life support system, but one he had never seen or heard of before. He was accompanied by a blue-haired woman who introduced herself as Conan. "You weren't kidding when you said you needed medical attention, sweet merciful Kami," Naruto whistled. "You should not even be alive based on your appearance. Are you capable of healing me?" Pain inquired, his purple-ringed eyes fixed on Naruto. Naruto had researched various dojutsu after implanting the Sharingan into himself, primarily to see if there were others that could improve his eyesight even further to aid his work as a doctor. Surprisingly, he saw none, but the Rinnegan piqued his interest. Many of the abilities he discovered after eating what was known as a devil fruit could be done with those eyes. Naruto remembered reading about devil fruit in Law's journal, and he laughed when he read about seawater's strange weakness. But he put it to the test and sank like a fucking rock, so he knew it was true. He was lucky that his bloodlines and abilities that did not involve his devil fruit powers were still available to him, or he would have been fucked that day. Plus, because most of his travels took him inland, his weakness was less of a factor to be concerned about. Sure, there was regular water, but his weakness was seawater. "Well, that's what we're going to see about now," Naruto said as he approached the crippled man and examined him. Naruto then channeled chakra into his hands and began rubbing the man all over his body, all while Conan kept a close eye on him. Normally, he could see the damage done within half a minute, but the amount of damage done to this man was far greater than any other man had ever suffered. He was a literal miracle because, in all reality, he should have died, but he was still alive. He would have added kicking, but because the life support system had him locked in place, that was not entirely accurate. Naruto had to take out a scroll and start writing down the long list of things that needed to be fixed, and dear Kami, the list was massive. Naruto began calculating the total amount owed after completing his examination. Only the wealth of a daimyo could afford the extensive amount of surgery required, and even then, the man would go bankrupt at the end of the procedure. Naruto sighed as he handed the bill to Konan, knowing that if Pain saw it, he would have a heart attack from the amount. The color on Konan's face faded as she saw it, and she began to glare at Naruto. "Do you think we're fools?" Konan demanded, hurling the scroll back at Naruto, "that we'd actually pay these clearly marked up prices." "My prices are set in stone," Naruto said with a shake of his head. "I never mark them up, and I never will because the number of clients I have means I don't have to." "How come the bill is so high? Do you realize how much surgery this man would require to return to his prime? To be able to walk around without the need for this life support system? This is the total of all the prices I set. You knew my services were a little pricey, but I do what others can't, which is why you came to me, so don't yell at me for showing you the reality of the situation and the price that comes with it. Can't you give us?" Konan began, pausing for a moment to consider the appropriate term to use in this situation. "I don't know. Is there a discount for bulk purchases?" "I wish I could," Naruto said, shaking his head, "but I am unable to." "After all, why not?" "Because money is how the world works," Naruto explained, closing his eyes and sighing, "and nothing in the world is free." "You greedy!" screamed Konan before Naruto stopped her with his hand. "No," Naruto said solemnly, "I am not greedy in the least." "How can you not be greedy with these prices?" "Because to heal people, I need to buy materials to make the various medicines that I use to heal people," Naruto explained. "My power does not just heal people alone, it just allows me to get to the damage in a way that no one else can and remove disease or repair what has been damaged. So I need the money to pay for the materials to actually cure the people I help. Unfortunately, that's how the world works." "There's no way the materials you need are that expensive," Konan said, crossing her arms and staring at Naruto. "You're right," Naruto said as he took out a journal, "they don't. Some are more expensive than others because they are far more rare, but they are not as expensive. But the reason I charge so much is for a completely different reason." "And what possible reason could you have for charging people such high prices?" Konan inquired. Pain was curious as well, but he was weak as he was and let Konan do the talking for him because all she had asked was the same things he would if he could. "Believe it or not," Naruto said, handing her his financial journal to examine, "but I have 4 separate accounts in my name. Each one is used for a different purpose, with the largest one receiving approximately 85% of my earnings. Then there's one that's 10%, one that's 4%, and one that's just 1%. Pain and Konan were surprised to hear Naruto openly discuss his finances in this manner, as most people keep their finances far more private so that they are not targets for theft. However, Naruto was already a target for his abilities as a doctor, so it made sense to them. "Now I know what you're probably thinking," Naruto said as he took out his cane and began to lean on it, "that I keep the other 85% to myself. That couldn't be further from the truth. That money is used to support about a dozen different orphanages all over the world. And because I support so many people, it costs a lot of money." "And why would someone like you give a damn about orphans?" Konan asked, fearful of the answer. Her and Pain, or Nagato before he took up the current on Pain, were orphaned during the Third Shinobi War. Nobody helped them because no one cared about them, so they had to fend for themselves. Hearing someone, especially one with such a deadly reputation, helping orphans like this made her question his motivations. "You may find this difficult to believe given who I am and the fact that I can use bloodline abilities," Naruto chuckled. Everyone assumed that his op abilities were inherited, but they were not. "However, I am not a member of any clan. My mother raised me until I was 5 years old, and while I know who my father is, he refuses to acknowledge my existence, so I am an orphan because he would never claim me. At least he didn't back then, but now he keeps trying and I tell him to fuck off. But my point is that I understand how difficult life can be for those who have lost their families. I also know people who have all the money, people who have more than they could possibly spend in their lives but don't. But having money does not make you immune to disease and the like, so I charge these fees to get their money and help those who the world will not help get the help they need so that their lives will turn out better than mine did. The 10% account contains my funds for purchasing the materials required to manufacture my medicine. I save the 4% so that when I have my own family, I will be financially prepared. I'm only keeping 1% for myself. But why would you limit yourself to such a small amount of money? Conan asked, having finished reading Naruto's financial journal to ensure he was telling the truth about his spending. He had gone into great detail about how he spent his money. He even mentioned that he had recently purchased a cup of coffee. He was meticulous in keeping track of his spending. Because I was raised poor, Naruto stated simply, and yet I was happy because I had a mother who loved me. But when she died, I was devastated. Sure, I made a lot of money over time, but it reminded me of those arrogant pieces of shit from clans with all their money, and I realized I didn't want to be like that, so I keep my funds to a minimum because the things I want aren't that expensive. Sure, I splurge every now and then, like with these clothes, which I had custom made, and a few other things over the years, but I still keep it simple. Be that as it may, Pain said weakly, and hearing his voice made Naruto realize how frail he was. Sure, he had performed the examination, but hearing it in the man's voice painted a perfect picture of the man's health. Is there any way to reduce the cost? I'm sorry to say there isn't, Naruto said, shaking his head, because the sheer amount of materials required will deplete my reserves and require a complete replenishment. But I do have a way to heal you that, while costly, is nowhere near what you just saw. And what is it? Conan inquired, raising an eyebrow. First and foremost, Naruto explained as he twirled his cane before grabbing it with both hands behind his back, the procedure is one I keep to myself because if everyone knew I could do it, the attempts to capture me and force me to use it on others would skyrocket. I already have a lot on my plate, so I'd rather not add anything else to it if at all possible. So, if I'm going to talk about my own secret, I need to know about yours. So, tell me exactly what this organization of yours is doing. Allow me to reassure you that all information discussed here will remain with me and will not be shared with others. My specialty is maintaining client confidentiality. We seek to bring peace to this world, Pain stated simply, hoping Naruto would accept it at face value and leave it at that. He didn't want to talk about how they planned to do it because it would appear evil to those outside their organization and might prevent the man from being healed. A noble cause, Naruto admitted with a smirk, but in such a war-torn world as ours, with all the various shinobi villages around, just how in the hell do you plan to do that? I'd rather not discuss such matters, Pain said, not looking the man in the eyes. If you want me to help you, you must, Naruto said, because I want to know who it is I am healing, starting with your true name because I am fairly certain your parents did not name you Pain. Fine, Pain said, sighing. Nagato Uzumaki is my name. Our plan is to use all of the world's Jinchuriki to force all of the shinobi villages to stop fighting. Okay. Naruto rubbed his chin, surprised to see another Uzumaki up and about after hearing that only Kushina and her daughter remained. While I agree that sounds good on paper, it won't work in practice. And who are you to say that? Conan retorted, angry that Naruto had simply mocked their dream. I am a man who is a third party in all of this, Naruto said, holding his hands out to emphasize his point, and I see the world through my own eyes rather than those that show loyalty to a village. I see the way the world works, and I know that people have pride and will not simply submit as you wish. You would be viewed as a tyrant, and the people would repeatedly revolt against you until you were either dead or there was no one left to oppose you, literally because they would all be dead. And what do you propose we do then? Nagato asked, his voice tinged with rage. Naruto was not scared of the man because he was so weak in his current state. Give up on our dream after putting in so much effort to make it a reality? To be honest, Naruto sighed, I'd say yes to that. But not completely. Try to turn this land into a sort of utopia, showing the rest of the world the way to peace rather than forcing it down their throats. That won't work, Nagato lamented. Well, be that as it may, Naruto said, twirling his cane again as he pondered the situation, I will heal you because you answered my question. But I fear it will be for naught because the path you are on will result in the deaths of many others, as well as yourself. But I'm a doctor, and I stay out of shinobi business because it's not my field. But, as I previously stated, it will still be quite expensive, albeit not as much as the standard type of surgery. And what is this alternative method you mentioned? Conan inquired. Now, bear with me on this, Naruto said, but I have the ability to clone your body. The process can take a while depending on various factors such as your eyesight. The body is soulless and conscious, making it an incomplete clone of sorts. How exactly does that heal Nagato? I have the ability to move people's souls from one body to another as I please. Naruto stated matter-of-factly, I have the ability to transplant your soul into one of you in your prime. What you do from there is your business, because, as I previously stated, I stay out of shinobi matters. I don't believe you have such powers for some reason, Conan said, they just sound too impossible. I knew you'd say that, Naruto smirked as he slammed his cane into the ground and drew out 2 kunai. He then summoned a room, which shocked the two of them because they had no idea what the hell was going on and were therefore unaware of the kunai thrown at them. They had their hearts pierced, but they did not die. Shambles. Their hearts switched places, which shocked them even more because Conan was now in severe pain and Nagato had no idea how to deal with such a sudden sex change. Do you still believe it's impossible? Naruto asked, pulling out 2 more kunai to reverse the process. No, Nagato in Conan's body said, comically waving her hands, we believe you, just please fix this. Naruto obeyed their request and reversed the process. Now that you've seen what I'm capable of, Naruto said, pulling out a receipt and writing out the new price, this is the bill for the procedure. Conan, relieved to be back in her own body, took the bill from him and examined it. Nagato was in pain, but the magnitude of it was mind-boggling. She noticed that the bill was much lower than the other, but as Naruto stated, it was still quite expensive. Conan displayed it to Nagato, who simply nodded in response. Conan then left the room to go get the money to pay the bill, which they had, but only a portion of it. Naruto began the cloning preparations by taking several samples from Nagato and asking if he wanted any changes to his body done while he was at it. Nagato said no, which Naruto could understand, and then summoned a door to place the items into the proper device, allowing the process to begin. He kept some of his blood for research purposes, but not too much. When he returned, there was Conan waiting for him with a massive scroll full of money to pay him. Well, I've started the process, Naruto said as he took the scroll from her and the journal he lent her to show his finances, so it will take some time for the clone to fully form. Try to relax for the next month or 2. I'll notify you as soon as it does so that we can complete the procedure. I am a man of my word, and since you have paid me, I will do as you have instructed. You better, Conan warned, or else. There is no need for threats, my dear, Naruto said as he began to walk backwards towards his door, because if I wasn't going to help, I would have simply left before all of this. With that, Naruto walked through the door, leaving Nagato and Conan to hope as it vanished from their sight. Naruto had not lied about the path Nagato was taking that would lead to his death. Because the man's plans involved all of the Jinchuriki, he would either send others or himself to try to capture Fu for his plans. And when that day came, he would deal with Nagato because he had given the man ample warning. Spring Valley. Naruto arrived home hoping to cook a proper meal and get some actual sleep, but he only got one of those things because the note left by Haku was discovered after he had finished eating and was making his way to his bedroom. Naruto. I and Zabuza have made contact with members of the Kiri rebellion and have decided to assist them in their fight. I know you're not interested in shinobi matters, but could you please see it in your heart to help just this once, if not for them, then for me? Kiri holds both my most hated and most treasured memories, and I can't stand by and watch as those with a bloodline, like me, are hated and killed. So, whether you choose to help us or not, I'm going. But I sincerely hope to see you there. That was the end of the note. To be honest, it irritated Naruto a little to see Haku just run off and join a war like that. But Naruto could understand her reasoning, if only slightly, because he had never fought for a village because he had never belonged to one. Sure, he was born in Konoha, but Minato had destroyed any chance of Naruto becoming a shinobi, effectively killing off any chance of loyalty Naruto had for the village. But he knew that if he had been in her shoes, he would have done the same thing because he understood her. While his instincts told him to stay out of it and let them fight it out, his love for her, combined with the fact that he already had a massive target on his back for taking Fu from Taki, convinced him otherwise. He decided that for once in his life, he would take the initiative and fight because he couldn't continue to be a third-party member. In addition, as he reflected on all of this, a promise he made to himself many years ago came to the forefront of his mind. When he lost everything and discovered the truth about his life from his mother's journal, he set out to become a shinobi in order to become far more infamous than Minato ever was, in order to overshadow one of the most infamous men who was labeled as a flea on sight in the bingo book. He was already infamous with his title of Surgeon of Death, but he had done nothing more than gruesomely kill a fair number of shinobi who threatened him to earn that title. He was no better than any other missing nin out there, and the decision became clearer as he thought about it more. His father had done so much damage with his Hiraishin jutsu that Iwa had surrendered, so now it was up to him to see if he could match that. So he left a note for Fu, who was also staying in the guest room because she had nowhere else to go, and then summoned a door to teleport to the nearest place near Kiri that he could possibly get. Kiri Battleground, 2 days later. The conflict between the rebels of Mist and those who remained within it lasted a long time. Mei Terumi, their leader, had obtained vital intelligence that should have resulted in their victory, but it turned out to be a clever trap. Mei, Haku, and Zabuza had fought side by side as their numbers began to dwindle one by one until they were too few to fight and were captured instead. Mei could only scowl as Yagura gloated over his victory over the rebellion and the fact that they would now die for their actions, wondering what had gone wrong. It was only then that she discovered the truth. Her right-hand man, Ao, had been a double agent since the beginning, working for Yagura. His words had been that he was loyal to the Mizukage, not a haughty woman who constantly threatened others to hide her own inadequacy. Mei had sworn vengeance on him, but all he did was spit in her face and punch her to make up for all the abuse he had suffered under her command. Yagura had a makeshift executioner's block in the center of the battlefield that he planned to burn after everything was over in order to cremate the bodies because he didn't want to separate the rebels and the loyalists so that the latter could be buried. The three of them watched as the men and women who had fought alongside them for their just cause were beheaded on the chopping block one by one. Yagura wanted Mei to be the last one because she was one of the people who started this rebellion, and it seemed poetic that she would be the last one. So, over the course of an hour, the rebellion's numbers were reduced to just 3, and Haku was treated roughly and thrown onto the block. She began to cry in fear of her death as she remembered her mother's death, and memories of her own past began to haunt her mind. However, as the memories moved closer to the present, her thoughts turned to Naruto. He had been there for her during the worst parts of her life and had shown her a happier one when she had assumed there was none to be found. She smiled at her memories of him, and she cursed herself for agreeing to that stupid bet with Kuretsuchi with their relationship on the line. She had done so out of pride because Naruto had always told her she was strong, and his words had penetrated both her heart and her mind. She became arrogant in her belief that she was strong, which led her to join the rebellion in order to help them get Kiri back. And right now, she swore to Kami that if she made it through this, she would give Naruto a night he would never forget. But as she saw the blade coming down to end her life in her peripheral vision, those visions began to fade as the reality of the situation set in. She closed her eyes and waited for the moment when she would accept her fate, but it never came. When she opened her eyes, what she saw was far worse, to the point where she screamed. Naruto was standing right where she had been, his head shaved cleanly off. As she watched his blood drip down the block, the horror of the situation caused tears to well up in her eyes. "Who the hell is that?" exclaimed Yagura, who was taken aback by the appearance of this random man. It made no sense, but it didn't matter to him because the man had chosen death for whatever reason, and because he was most likely a bloodline user or sympathizer, he would have died either way if Yagura had his way. His shock was compounded when he heard the man who had just been killed laugh. Only then did he notice that the area seemed to be surrounded by a thin pale form of energy. Common courtesy dictates that a man offer his own name before asking for someone else's, Naruto explained as he stood up and brushed himself off. The executioner, whose name no one knew, not that Naruto knew or cared, backed up in shock that the man whose head he had just severed was still alive in some way. Naruto's body then knelt and picked up his head, placing it on his neck where it belonged, much like a hat. Something he was all too familiar with, given that he wore one the majority of the time. "My name is Yagura," the named man explained as he prepared to order his men to murder this man. "Now tell me your name so I can remember the man who once surprised me." "My name is Naruto." Naruto laughed as he removed his hat and began to twirl it on his finger before swiping it behind him. The man who had played executioner behind him screamed as his face was literally slashed off by his hat. His hat, like his clothes, were custom made from a fabric he paid good money for and had been soaked in his blood for weeks. This caused the fabric to sink with his own blood using bloodline, allowing him to repair it if necessary as well as harden it into a unique flexible armor. The same could be said for his hat, but he could also use it as a weapon, as he just did after sharpening the edge with steel release. Nobody expected a hat to be a weapon, so it was ideal for him because he thrived on the unconventional. He grabbed the man who tried to kill his girlfriend's face and slammed it onto the ground before slamming his foot down hard, squishing it into paste so that when the room was dispersed later, he would die because nothing could stop the massive blood loss he would suffer from not having about a fourth of your head. "And why have you decided to come here?" Yagura asked arrogantly, motioning for his men to surround the four of them because they were all going to die. Nothing could ever change that. "Have you come to join the rebellion?" "You're far too late because they were decimated not long ago by my own forces, so you came all this way to die alongside their dwindling numbers." "I came at the request of a friend," Naruto said, pulling out a kunai in his free hand while the other clutched the handle of his cane. "While it may appear that I came here to fight, in reality, I came here to heal because I am a doctor." "Well, you're too late for any of that," Yagura laughed, holding out his arms to show Naruto the sheer number of bodies littering the fields. The blood of so many participants in what Naruto thought was a stupid war had stained the once green grass. To despise someone because they were born with special abilities. That meant they were either jealous or afraid of them, and either one was simply stupid in his own eyes. He noticed this and simply smirked. "Because the rebellion is dead, and the last members of it will be killed here and now alongside yourself." "Is that what you believe?" Naruto asked, with a sinister laugh that made everyone who heard it, except Haku, feel a chill crawl up their spines. It was a deep murderous tone that Haku had only heard Naruto use when her life was in danger. Kami only knew what he planned to do to an army because he did it to Sasuke and Naruto castrated him for it. "Because I have my doubts." "You arrogant brat!" yelled Ao, lunging forward to slash at Naruto's throat with a blade, but Naruto simply smiled as his shadow clone dragged the elderly man through the floor of the makeshift execution ground. It wasn't so difficult because the thing had been built so quickly that it wasn't all that sturdy. Naruto had promised not to use the shadow clone jutsu against Konoha, which he would keep because, as he had said so many times before today, he was a man of his word, but this was Kiri, so the promise no longer applied. So he lifted his foot to cave in this man's face, but he was stopped by someone. "Don't kill him yet," Mei Terumi, who Haku had taken the time to untie alongside Zabuza so they could get to their feet, said as she grabbed his arm. "Why?" With a raised eyebrow, Naruto inquired as to why Mei would spare an enemy who had slaughtered her army. "He betrayed us and is the reason our rebellion failed," growled Mei, her eyes filled with murderous rage that burned deep within her soul. "Oh, is that correct?" Naruto chuckled. Instead, he drew a powerful tranquilizer and stabbed the man in the neck with it. Ao immediately fell asleep, and Naruto grabbed him by the head and handed him over to Mei to deal with. He then summoned a door, surprising everyone who had never seen his ability before, and instructed the group to retreat. Yagura finally came to his senses as Haku was about to go through, making him even more of an idiot in Naruto's books for allowing all of this to happen in the first place and ordering his men to attack. Haku expected Naruto to follow, but he simply grabbed her waist with one arm and slammed his lips to hers, which she returned in kind. The Kiri loyalists were only seconds away when Naruto curved his free hand's fingers inwards, catching all of the men who charged forward to attack him in his wires like a fly in a spiderweb. "I love you," Naruto said as their lips parted for air, "but please don't let Mei and Zabuza touch anything." "What?" Haku exclaimed, shocked that Naruto was implying that he would not accompany them. "Have you gone insane? If you stay, they will kill you." "I'm hurt, Haku," Naruto said mockingly. "That was what I assumed you liked about me. But don't be concerned about me. Everything will be fine. Don't you daw," was all she could say before he shoved her backwards into the door and then dispelled it so she couldn't return. He sighed, knowing he'd pay later, but then turned around to face the army that still had him surrounded. "Now where were we?" thought Naruto. "Oh, that's right." Naruto then fully formed his hand into a fist, severing the men caught in his wires as the wires cut cleanly through them. "Are you insane?" Yagura inquired, a puzzled expression on his face. "Do you really believe you can take on an army like mine on your own? Who do you think you are, Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage?" "No," Naruto replied, his smirk tinged with a deep growl at the mention of his asshole of a father's name. "I believe I am better than him. But, because this is all theory, I need to run some tests to prove it, and fortunately for me, you brought so many subjects to test with. I'm not sure where you sent those 3, but it doesn't matter," Yagura said, signaling his men to prepare to kill this brat. He had lost many of his men in the battle, but he still had about 2/3 of them here, which was about 6,000 shinobi that this idiot of a child had challenged with a Jinchuriki. Since their rebellion is over, and the bounty that will soon be placed on their heads, anyone they may have thought they could trust will turn on them for the money offered. "Well, if I'm correct," Naruto said, pulling out a kunai and cutting his hand deep enough that blood began to spill from the wound. This action perplexed many because it was unusual, but not as much as Naruto throwing his blood into the pile of dead bodies of the rebels who had been executed not long ago. "You must return to your office to put such a plan into action. Unfortunately for you, you will not be able to return to your office to do so. How do you figure that when we have you surrounded from all sides?" "Trade secret," Naruto said, "but before we begin, I just want you to know you've already messed up 3 times, and it's because of that you've already lost this fight without realizing it." "You have piqued my interest," Yagura said as he motioned for them to hold position while remaining vigilant. "So, tell me, what was my blunder?" "First and foremost," Naruto said, raising one finger, "you attempted to murder my girlfriend, and I take exception to that. Second, you have completely jeopardized my future, which I cannot accept." "And how the hell did I endanger your future?" a perplexed Yagura asked. He wasn't expecting that response, so it surprised him to hear it from a man he'd never met before, "Since I don't know who the fuck you even are." "You hate bloodline users, don't you?" Naruto inquired knowingly, "Because I heard you do, and since I have about 5 of them, you must really despise me." so I'm going to get rid of you before you start your so-called purge on the rest of the world. The main reason you lost here today is that you chose the worst possible location to fight me. If I had been anywhere else, I would not have been so bold in my actions, but that is your fault, not mine." At this point, Yugura had had enough of listening and ordered his men to attack. "It's too late," Naruto smirked as the men charged forward. They got close, but as they got closer, they were all thrown off balance as they felt the ground rumble around them. What they witnessed next horrified them in a way that would haunt them in the afterlife. What they saw was a massive circle of crimson liquid encircling the entire battlefield and closing in on them all. As they got closer, they realized the liquid coming at them like a tidal wave was blood, thick and crimson blood. "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here," Naruto said with a sinister grin as he stood his ground. Kiri's army was swept up in the liquid, as was Yugura, who had erected a thick water shield to protect himself from the bloody current. Most died in the tides, drowning as a result of the pressure and strength of the blow they received when they were swept up into the attack. Those people had the best luck. Those who were still alive for one reason or another felt the blood surrounding them warm up. They had assumed it was due to the large number of bodies in the liquid, but this was not the case. Naruto's blood had infected the dead bodies of all who had died on the battlefield, giving him the power he needed to literally turn up the heat. As the temperature became too high for them to bear, these men were boiled alive in blood, and even Yugura began to sweat as the water he surrounded himself with began to boil, cooking him while he remained inside it. Naruto kept doing this until he felt that only Yugura was left alive, at which point he stopped controlling the massive amounts of blood and let it fall naturally. It soaked everything, including himself, but with his abilities, it simply vanished, leaving no trace of the substance on his person or clothes. Yugura landed hard on the ground and began coughing loudly because he was forced to hold his breath as he was nearly roasted alive in his little bubble of protection. "And then there was one," Naruto said as he started walking towards Yugura. He whipped out his cane and dipped the head of it into the blood that was literally everywhere, forming it into the scythe blade that he was famous for. He lifted it and brought it down at an angle, hoping to end this fight before it became something more, but his blade was stopped by Yugura's own weapon. "I won't die so easily," raged Yugura as he quickly drew a kunai and stabbed Naruto in the chest directly in the heart area. Naruto was experiencing a severe case of copyright yavu because so many people appeared to have stabbed him in this exact location. But no one knew that all of his organs were safe and sound in his secret room, where they couldn't be damaged like Yugura had tried. His brain was the only thing that could still be damaged because he couldn't remove it. He probably could, but he wasn't going to take the risk in case something went horribly wrong. He didn't mind if an organ failed because he could replace it, but his brain was not replaceable, so he was cautious about what he did to it. "Of course not," Naruto growled before Yugura slammed his fist into Naruto's chest. Naruto was thrown back quite a distance before regaining his footing and assuming an offensive stance with his cane. As a massive dragon made of water was launched at him, he remolded the blood on the tip into the shape of a claymore. Naruto simply slashed down with both hands, the blood doing its job and slicing the dragon down the middle, splitting it in half and going to his left and right. He wasn't a soldier or a weapon master, but he knew how to use them because they weren't as difficult to understand as human anatomy. Naruto had discovered that mixing the bloodlines in his body allowed him to perform many unique techniques, such as what he was doing now. The blade had slashed through the dragon, but his explosion release had sent a fiery shockwave out, singing the ground as it passed. Yugura had to flee quickly, but he felt the heat behind the attack and had to admit it was hotter than he had expected. He hadn't expected anything like what had happened to his men, and the fact that this bloodline using punk had managed to kill off so many people while holding his own like this only fueled the fires of his rage even more. So he decided to put an end to this right now and went on all fours, activating his tailed beast form. His entire body was a blood-red-orange color. He charged forward to attack Naruto, but he was stopped by his claymore. Naruto was a versatile fighter, to be sure, but he lacked the sheer strength to go toe-to-toe with a Jinchuriki when things got serious. While he was able to deflect the attack, he was still thrown backwards. Yagura attacked again, and this time Naruto couldn't block it, but he was able to dodge it for the most part. He got nicked on the skin, which began to solidify into a rock-like substance that quickly covered his body, leaving only his head exposed. Naruto tried and tried but was unable to break free. Yagura saw this as the ideal time to strike, and while he was correct, he was still overlooking one simple fact. Naruto was still in command of the blood on the field. As he was about to claw Naruto's throat out, a fist formed out of the blood and uppercutted the man hard in the jaw. This boosted him quite a bit, giving Naruto just enough time to use the blood and slam into the rock-like substance that was holding him. He was able to free himself after it broke. It was also a good thing, because Yagura landed on the ground shortly after and fired a small condensed Biju bomb at him. Naruto smirked as he wiggled his fingers a little, launching a few bodies into the path of the attack, causing them to take the force of it and be blown up instead of him.
This infuriated Yagura even more, and it was because of this that he formed an even larger one than the previous one to ensure Naruto would die even if he used bodies to shield him like before.
Naruto then decided to use something he had never used before. He closed his eyes for a split second before reopening them with the Sharingan activated. His eyes bled as he used Amaterasu fire, and the black flames engulfed Yagura as he screamed in agony. Naruto held his head because the ability had given him a headache. He wondered if that would continue if he used the power again, but he could think about that later because the fight was still going on. Yagura's beast form was consumed by the flame, leaving him in a damaged state with blood leaking out, but he wasn't finished because he then yelled out in rage as he went full beast on him. He grew enormous as all three of his tails swished behind him. While most people would flee in terror when faced with such overwhelming odds as Naruto was not like others. He simply stood firm and grinned. He had expected Yagura to pull this form out at some point, and he was correct. Naruto then lifted his arms, lifting all the bodies that littered the area with the power of the room, which was still active at the time. He then clapped his hands together, causing all the bodies to cover all over Yagura's giant form. To get to this point, he had done everything he could to distract the man. He knew that his other attacks would not be enough to defeat Yagura, so he infected all the bodies and let the blood soak in so that he could use them this way. Yagura screamed in rage as he tried to rip the bodies off of him with his tails and hands, but there were too many to rip off. Plus, the ones he ripped off resurfaced like a magnet. Naruto simply smirked and clicked his fingers once all the bodies were in place. The bodies exploded all at once, leaving a crater as people miles away felt the explosion. Yagura landed hard, his tailed beast form all but gone after taking the full force of a massive explosion point blank. In his severely weakened state, he attempted to get up from the ground, but all he managed to do was get off his stomach and onto his knees instead. He didn't have the strength to get any higher. Naruto reappeared in front of him, this time wielding a kunai that flashed with green electrical power. Like I said before, Naruto said as he prepared to deliver the finishing blow. Yagura had been a bit of a challenge, he knew, and if he wanted to fulfill his future wish, he would have to properly prepare for when he put it into play. You chose the worst possible location to fight me. This battlefield is stained with the blood of all those who died in your pointless war. With all that blood under my control, I was a challenge to even you. And the funny thing is that using it doesn't drain my chakra all that much. At least when the person isn't alive. When Naruto said this, he wasn't lying. Blood was relatively easy for him to control once he infected it with his own, but controlling the person whose blood it was took more effort. Not by much, but it took more effort from him. Just fucking kill me, coughed Yagura, glaring at Naruto with all the hatred he could muster in the hope that it would be enough to kill the brat. His blood was spilling out of his mouth as it exited through his teeth, and he had to cough up some of it. But I hope to see you in hell someday, because there I will personally torture you." Noticed. Naruto simply said as he stabbed Yugura in the throat with his gamma knife and held onto it as the power coursed through the blade. Yugura screamed in pain as he felt whatever energy was now coursing through him begin to tear him apart from the inside out. Nonetheless, Naruto had stabbed the man in that location so that he wouldn't have to hear Yugura's screams, which he didn't want to hear. Naruto pumped energy into Yugura for what seemed like hours but was actually only 6 minutes, until he saw the life leave his eyes. Naruto let go of the blade as he noticed Yugura slumping forward slightly as blood flowed from his mouth. Naruto rose to his feet because he needed to get to his knees to stab Yugura, who was very short, and was about to return when he felt a massive surge of power erupt behind him out of nowhere. When he turned around, he saw what appeared to be a massive spiked turtle of some kind. This was the Biju who had once inhabited Yugura but was now free, at least in energy form, as his physical form would take some time to reform. To be honest, Naruto had no intention of doing so because he had never killed, or even fought, a Jinchuriki before. Thinking on instinct here, without any reasoning other than containment, Naruto used the power of his still-up room to channel the beast into a clear cube, just as he would if removing an organ. Surprisingly, he was able to contain the demon in its entirety, albeit in a small size. He wondered why it was so small when the stories about such beasts said they were much larger, but that was a question for another time because he was just glad he stopped it before it got worse than he wanted it to be. So he looked around to see if there was anyone else in the area who might try to attack him if he turned his back. But, to his relief, no one else was there. He'd found a good seal master a few months ago and had him create a specific sealed scroll for him, which he was now pulling out. It opened 2 massive metal doors with a sad face that split in half when activated. Naruto opened the door and summoned all the blood in the area, forcing it into the door, which led to a massive closet. He closed the doors and resealed the scroll before sending it away once the blood was fully present. Normally, he would save the blood for later use, but the decay and taint from his use as a weapon rendered it useless for blood transfusions. But he was fine with it because he could still use it. With his mission completed, he summoned the door and walked through it, holding the 3-tailed beast in his hand. Working area. Mei, Zabuza, and Haku were all sitting down, taking a much-needed break from the war they had survived with Naruto's help. Mei had planned to torture Ao, who was still asleep from the tranquilizer Naruto had injected him with, but Haku stopped her by saying that this was Naruto's operating room, and he needed to keep it clean so that future patients could be healed. Mei was hesitant to listen at first, but Zabuza warned her that she never wanted to irritate Naruto because it never ended well. Mei demanded to know everything they knew about him, which they did because they were stuck here until Naruto came and got them because he was the only one who could get to and from this place. They made sure Mei understood, and it worried them a little because Naruto had challenged a literal army. If he died, they would be trapped here forever, with no way out. As they talked, Haku took Ao and strapped him to the operating table, preventing the man from escaping and doing something stupid like breaking something in a futile attempt to escape. They all breathed a sigh of relief as the door reappeared and Naruto walked through it, holding a clear cube. What surprised them was that the cube contained the sleeping form of the 3-tailed beast, but before they could question him, he walked into his secret room, closed the door before they could see inside, and placed the cube into a container. For the time being, the beast was unable to free itself from the thing. So he put it in a container of liquid nitrogen to kill it. The creature was made of energy at its core, so it could not die. He left it alone for the time being because there wasn't much else he could do. To be honest, he had no idea what to do with the creature because he hadn't planned on it. He just wanted to see if he could do it and went with it. But those were thoughts for another time, because he now had people to answer to. "I know you have questions," Naruto said as he exited his secret room, "and I'll answer any and all of them as long as they don't involve my secret room." "How the hell did you contain the 3 tails like that?" exclaimed Zabuza, who didn't mince words and simply asked the question that everyone was thinking. I can't explain the science behind it, Naruto sighed, but I used my ability to contain it like you saw. What about Yugura? Mei inquired, is he? With a chuckle, Naruto asked, dead? Indeed. That was something I personally ensured. But how? Zabuza was having difficulty formulating the question. He had attempted to kill Yugura years before and nearly lost his life when he failed, so hearing that someone else had done what he couldn't messed with his mind quite a bit. Stabbed through the throat and shocked with electrical currents until his organs all failed in such a way that not even the demon within him could repair the damage, Naruto stated simply. In response to his response, Zabuza unconsciously took a few steps back in fear of the boy. And his army? Mei inquired, eager to learn more. Boiled alive, Naruto declared, and that is all I will say on the subject. So that simply leaves him alone, Naruto pointed to Ao, who was still unconscious. Well, I'm about to change that, Mei raged. In her mind, she had waited long enough and would now begin to hurt the man who had betrayed them. When Naruto grabbed her hand, she stormed over to his sleeping form and grabbed a surgical scalpel to begin. Please don't use my surgical equipment for your own personal vendetta, Naruto said as he yanked the scalpel from her grip and tossed it into a disinfectant container. But he must suffer for what he has done, screamed Mei, clearly enraged at being denied her vengeance. I agree, Naruto said, but don't use my equipment. Naruto then injected her with a mild tranquilizer, causing her to fall asleep. Naruto. Wah, that was all Haku had to say before falling asleep. Just do it, Zabuza said, knowing he was next. So Naruto did as he instructed. Once he was asleep, he created a shadow clone to prepare the room for what was about to happen, while grabbing Haku and opening the door to their bedroom. He tucked her into their bed and kissed her on the cheek before heading to get Zabuza. He sat the man on his couch because he had never visited Zabuza's place, which was because Zabuza didn't like visitors, with Haku being the exception, and not by choice. However, any man who is threatened with groin piercings usually yields to the demands of the person threatening them. While he was doing this, his shadow clone set up the plastic he had made into a containment area. Some procedures became bloody, with the stuff getting all over the place. Naruto was not bothered by the sight of blood. It was the inconvenience of cleaning that forced him to make this decision. It covered the entire area around the operating table, leaving enough space to move around freely. He also moved Ao for a short time to cover the operating table in thick plastic sheets before strapping him down again because there were holes for the restraints to pass through. This reduced the amount of blood on the table, which he expected to be a lot. Once everything was in place, he walked over to Mei and placed her in a chair before pulling out a small white pill. He cracked it open under her nose, and when she smelled it, she jumped out of bed. What? Where am I? She asked, looking around frantically. You were trying to kill an elderly man in my operating room before I put you to sleep. Why the hell did you do that? Mei raged. Because you were attempting to use my surgical instruments to do so. Naruto stated simply. What's the big deal? Are you going to let that traitor walk free? No, Naruto said as he pulled out a pill and popped it into his mouth, using his bloodline ability as if he had made him a little woozy and needed it to get rid of that feeling, which it did. He's still restrained over there. And now what? Oh, have at him, Naruto said as he handed Mei a closed metal box, adding, but use these instead of my surgical equipment. What is this? Mei inquired, her gaze drawn to the box. Old rusted tools that I was going to sell as scrap to a man who melts down metal to sell to others, Naruto smirked. I never said I wouldn't let you kill the man. I just said you couldn't use my surgical instruments to do it. Has anyone ever told you, Mei asked, beginning to chuckle with a sinister smile on her face, that you are a sadistic man? A few times, Naruto said as he began to walk towards the door, but take your time. Don't be concerned about the mess. That's why I set up the room the way I did. When you're finished, return the tools to the box and exit through the door. It leads to my kitchen in my house. Oh, and before I forget. Naruto took another pill and handed it to Mei. What is this? Mei, who had never seen a pill like this before, inquired. Snap it in half under the man's nose, Naruto explained, and it will force him awake. Torturing a sleeping man makes no sense. I think you and I will get along just fine, Mei laughed. Only time will tell, Naruto said as he approached his front door. It had been a long day, and he was looking forward to taking a hot shower and sleeping before the next major event involved him. As a result, he shut the door behind him and let Mei have her sadistic fun.
And as Ao screamed to the heavens in agony from the pain he was forced to endure until he died, he should have been thanking his lucky stars that Naruto was too exhausted to do it himself after fighting off an army and a fully enraged Mizukage like he had.
Naruto would have been even more cruel.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.